All right, hello, David. Okay, we'll start in 1 minute. Hello, Claire, I see your thing, but I don't see you. I don't hear you.
Yeah, video isn't working. It says that it's showing, it's not.
Okay, sorry, I'm not hearing you very well, but it might be me. All right, why don't we, it's time. Why don't we go ahead? We have basically everybody in the commission here. So I'll call to order the June 20th, 2022 meeting of Parks, Recreation and Forestry Commission agenda. So welcome all. Matt, you have the roll call. Everybody indicated. So first item is approval of the minutes from the last meeting of June 6th. I would entertain a motion to accept the minutes as submitted.
So moved.
All right, motion. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Okay, next second. Thanks. Any corrections, additions, deletions? All right, hearing none. The minutes are approved as submitted. Thank you. New business. Number 1, parks and open space fee or land dedication for the Bell Farms development. This is something that's been referred to us from Plan Commission, and it's a big and very nice, beautiful addition being put on the north side of town. I think we've looked at this before. The issue, however, is they're looking to get a specific plan implementation in place and approved through, and what they have is the donation of 3 acres of land for us, and that falls very far short of what the city recommendation or mandates are for divisions such as this. So it's been referred back to us to discuss as to what we think is the appropriate recommendations to make the Plan Commission and Council regarding what to do with the Bell Farms development. Matt, you want to add anything?
So a lot of the development that we've seen, at least in my time, all of the development we've seen during my time with the city, which is about 5.5 years, has been infill development, where there hasn't been land dedicated. And so in all of those instances, they pay the fee in lieu. What's maybe different here is the last multifamily, or I shouldn't say multifamily, the last large scale development was approved by the city was the community of Bishops Bay, and they were required to meet the ordinance in terms of land dedication. And if you look back at the minutes, PRFC was pretty adamant about them meeting the land acreage requirement for that. I know Chuck Non's on the call for something else, but he was on the commission at that time and probably remembers that. But I believe their total requirement for land dedication is 98 acres based on the density of the community of Bishops Bay development. What's unique here is that we have a land dedication occurring, and that as staff, we've been discussing and trying to give a recommendation of how to proceed in regards to the Bell Farm development. And so what we did is, because housing units, the fee based on housing units versus the fee that the ordinance, so there's 2 methods, and we're not arguing that the ordinance number would be the true fee in lieu ordinance would be somewhere around 3.7 million. We're not arguing, we're not advocating that. What we did is we took the total housing unit calculation, which would have been 1.9 million. The city assessor has valued the land that's being dedicated at 199,000 per acre. It's important to note that that is land that's within the city. It's within urban service. It will have utility service to differentiate it from maybe other land sales that have occurred outside of the city. So that it's valued at 199,000 per acre. So we're providing credit of the 597,000 for the 3-acre dedication. And then that this would leave a balance of 1.3 1.3, just over 1.3 million for the fee in lieu amount. So happy to answer any questions. I know that both Kathleen Slattery-Mashkow and Melissa Huggins are here to represent the Bell Farm Development Project if there's questions of them as well.
All right, comments from anybody?
Yeah, I would like to know what the rationale is for the lesser amount of dedication.
Why they're only giving 3 acres?
Right, yeah, what, I mean, I remember coming to the meeting and, you know, she was showing us this idea of this park and
They've only ever
the
proposed.
staircase and all this.
They've only ever proposed dedicating 3 acres. There is
Oh,
some
they did,
private.
okay.
There is some private development, but they've never, in every presentation that I've been part of, it's been a proposed 3-acre dedication for public parkland.
But you're saying that it's less than what it used to be, is that correct?
No, the ordinance based on the density, our current ordinance would require them to dedicate 29 acres for parkland based on the density of the subdivision.
I think, Joan, part of the issue here, because I sit on plan commission, is that we're excited about the dedication of the 3 acres as a park, which is nice. But the statutes for the city require significantly more than that. And the response for the SIP for this development is coming and said, well, we think that's enough and we shouldn't really have to do anything else. And I think that raised some flags, certainly raises flags to me, because that's significantly under what the expectations of the city is. And I've not seen a rationale personally yet as to why this particular development should be willing to say, sorry about your statutes for the city, but we sort of just don't care. This is what we're going to do. And so it's been referred to us to talk about this issue. So, I mean, I guess I'm stating my purposes. I think that the 3 acres is generous, but it's not nearly what the city requires. And I've not seen rationale. Maybe Kathleen, you can speak to this, but I've not. Your note to the plan commission makes it sound like we think we've done enough. And so that's it, end of discussion.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think that's just it. I'd love to have a discussion about this. I've been asking for this number for over a year, and we've needed this number for our performas and everything else. So as you mentioned, or as has been mentioned, in order to meet the ordinance, or at least one of the ways the ordinance is set out, it would be 29 of our 44 acres. Once you take the wetland delineation, bringing through Bellefontaine Road, all the other requirements of the land, there wouldn't be any land left to dedicate. So I know that the city realizes that with compact development, that the city is also desiring that the current way that the ordinance reads, maybe it needs to be looked at. And I know the city is having Baker Tilly explore that. So I know that this has been confusing. I'm wondering, John, back from you, I've got like a laundry list of things I want to go through, but where do I go if there's no land left? You know what I mean? There's 29 acres of 44 acres. 4 acres is wetlands. 4 acres was for Graber Pond. There, you know, then I can't remember how many acres are dedicated to bringing Bellefontaine through. I mean, we're getting to 44 pretty quickly. So there's no, and again, I understand that the city is looking at this or having Baker Tilly look at it, but it won't be in time for our project. So a couple of other things I'll point out is that the valuation that we were granted in this in the counter proposal was $200,000 per acre. And I do want to remind Commission, am I able, I do want to remind the Parks Commission, am I able to share my screen?
Sure, go ahead. If you got Matt, can she?
I think it needs to be enabled.
Okay.
So, oops.
Matt, can you enable her or what? I don't have control.
She should be able to now.
Okay.
And just one thing that I want to point out is the Baker Tilly study is likely to not be friendly to future development.
Mm-hmm.
The valuation of the $199,000 per acre would put this development's requirement likely closer to $6 million than the 1.9 that our current housing states. And I think the biggest challenge here is that for a long time, Middleton has maintained a standard of 15 acres of parkland per 1,000 residents.
Can I ask, so in the, and again, there's more stuff that I want to talk to, but when I looked at Abby's comments in terms of past projects, it looks like Misty Valley, which was 200 and some units. So I know you compared us to, Bishop's Bay, which was 2,000 and some units. And then if you look at Misty Valley, it was 200 and some units. So we probably fall somewhere in between there. And Misty Valley was much closer in time than Bishop's Bay was. They dedicated a ½ acre, it looks like, based on Abby's notes, and she clarified that today. She had a comment in there about Hidden Oaks, but she meant it to say Misty Valley. So Misty Valley dedicated a ½ acre, and there might be, Matt, you might know the history, and that would be helpful for me to know too. So they dedicated a ½ acre, they had 200 and some dwelling units, and then gave a donation of 100,000, and then later promise of a donation of 200,000 or 300,000. So I'm just,
here's what I can say about that. I wasn't here. I can't speak to what happened, but I don't know how anyone in good conscience allowed that to happen and proceed. That's all I can say about that project. It doesn't fit a model of another single project the city has done in the city's history in terms of park dedication or park development. I don't understand how it went forward and where those numbers came from, but there is not another project that hasn't followed the ordinance or I mean, even I know Hidden Oaks was mentioned in Abby's memo. They actually donated more acreage than they were required to by the ordinance.
I'm just trying to get this screen thing up so that I can share this with you guys. So, well, I kind of wanted to run through some of the numbers so that we're clear on everything. So I know that we dedicated the 3 acres to parkland dedication. And then I'm going to share, just having trouble sharing this screen for some reason. Can you guys see that? I can't seem to advance it though. So in general, for the private parkland that we have, I'm so sorry, you guys, I don't know why I can't share this, but I know Abby had listed 13 acres. We actually have 16 acres of private parkland space that we are doing. And then that also, we're guaranteeing 50% open space. We're going the absolute distance on this project in terms of sustainability. From a sustainability perspective, every moment throughout this entire project, I've thought about the public domain. So even when we're looking at the private buildings that are either privately, private homes or privately, whether they're commercial structures, I'm thinking about the public domain. I want people to, when they're there, whether they live there or are visiting, to be inspired. And I want to give them a sense of place. I want, part of the ordinance talks about the, holding developers accountable to providing enough open space for people, enough park space for people. I mean, between the 3 acres that we dedicated and the 16 acres, I didn't see any, I didn't see any maybe credit that was given for our park or our private parkland that we dedicated.
Well, there was credit, but there's a 25% limit on the amount of credit for private parkland. And so the amount that you have far exceeds that. And so it's great that you have the parkland. I don't think we're necessarily arguing about that, but the ordinance says that you can't account for more than 25% of that. What we don't want is a gated community with a sense that we have all this beautiful parkland, but only private residents here can enjoy or have anything to do with this stuff.
All of our
and the
stuff
city is locked out from this stuff. So.
All of our stuff is open. I mean, I think everybody who's seen the previous plans knows that everything we're doing here is to improve the city of Middleton. And we're trying to, when you look at your long-term plans, I think everything we're doing is trying to help. It's not only for us and for the people who live there, but gets Middleton to where it wants to go. So I've been asking for the number for about a year. I understand that this is complicated. I don't envy anyone. And if that is the number, it is the number. but I do want to say when we got the message on Friday or Thursday or Friday about that, I mean, it makes the project infeasible, which means it comes from somewhere. Do we scrap things like we're doing going the extra mile in terms of geothermal? Do we raise otherwise it gets distributed among the housing. So everybody at the city's been talking about affordable housing. So does it just get added onto the individual houses? You know, or, I mean, when I got the message, I contacted my business partner because I'm just like, I think there could be a developer. I think there are many developers out there that could come in and buy the land and do this project differently and then and cheaper and not care as much about all the things we've cared about. And then they would have the $1.3 million because their costs would be so much cheaper. I mean, we have tried in every way to go to the nth degree for the city, for the environment. We gave public parkland. We kept 50% open space, even though we only were required to have 25% open space. At every turn, we went further, and because it matters. We're trying to create a sense of place, a place where, and nothing about Bell Farm is gated. We're in fact open, like everything's sort of open to the public. We, you know, in terms of the bike paths and the trails that go through and completing the taking the boardwalk that goes through the community and then continues it around Rayber Pond. So I you know, if there's another developer out there that can do this that could.
Kathy, we don't want to get into this kind of argument about who could develop it or not. I mean, I think you're doing a great job, but we need to discuss what's related to the issue specifically about the parkland. And so I don't mean to shut you off, but
no, I'm trying to just give out the whole picture for people who might not understand, like, because it was kind of put that we did that the way that I presented it in terms of the 3 acres being enough.
Yeah. I
put it in the context of the 3 acres being enough because of everything else that we're doing that goes the distance. So we weren't trying to be disrespectful to the parks or anything else. I was saying I really do believe that it was enough given everything else that we're doing. So I understand.
May have just from my stand needed a little more of what you're saying right now. But anyways, let's see the rest of the commission. Dan, you had your hand up.
Yeah, I have a question about, you talked about 13 acres of private parkland. Is that outside of the 3 acre dedication?
Yes.
So it's a 3 acre dedication and then 13 acres.
It's actually 16. Abby was working on some different numbers, but you can use 13. That's fine.
So if we use 13 and you donated 3, the maximum that we could count out of that 13 would be 25% of it. Am I understanding that correctly, Matt?
I think so.
Yeah, and it's not 25% of what she donated. It's 25% of what would have been the total amount required in the, and I think that was 7 acres, 7.8 something.
So it's 25% of the 29 acres. But
Yeah.
it's important to note that we're not using the 29 acres here as the baseline. We're using the housing density, the housing calculation, because that's more favorable to the developer.
Oh, way more favorable, I totally understand that. So then that takes that percentage, and that takes any private parkland out of the equation. Then is what we're saying. Any percentage of that it takes out of the equation because we use the different math to do it. Okay, all right.
Oh, okay. You lost me on that one, but that's.
Dan, did you have anything more to say? Because I've got my hand up too.
Not right at the moment. Go ahead.
All right, Matt, go ahead.
So a couple of things. We have other developments in the city that have city parkland and have balances of private park development that the developers developed for whatever niche or whatever thing they wanted to do. And the city has had the public parkland. And the demands on our public parkland and what people expect, 10 years from now, all of this will long be forgotten and it'll be a city. What's the city doing to serve the residents of this development? Of note, and I don't want to get too far into things that have only been discussed in closed session with the council, but most of the park board here is aware that we're looking to acquire adjacent parkland to this property. The only funding source we have for that is fee and lieu. And it is, if this moves forward and the 1.3 number is what is ultimately approved, it's going to be really close. I'm not saying that's what we're paying for the property, but there isn't going to be much left after we acquire that additional acreage that this commission and the council has deemed important for the public to serve, that for the city to serve that neighborhood. That's all I have, John.
All right. Other comments, questions?
One of the, so you dedicated the 3 acres, which is fantastic, right?
Mhm.
And you're gonna have 16 additional private parkland, but ultimately the city still has to develop that 3 acres into a park. And, you know, we have a park development fund that right now can only be used on new developments. And, you know, there's a finite amount of money in there to develop that, but also other projects that we have going on. And if we don't get, you know, any other additional fees in lieu, where's the funding source going to be to develop the 3 acres at Bell Farms? That's my biggest concern.
Does the park improvement cover any of that?
The park improvement fee can be used for that, but it's also important to note that due to change in state law, it's unlikely that we're going to be able to use any existing or other park development funded projects. It's, you know, I would guess that 90% or better of what is developed at the Bell Farm Park site is going to have to come from fees paid by the Bell Farm development.
Yeah, the law, I think it's been in 5 or 6 years, right? And it basically says that the money given by you, if this comes to that, has to be used to something that directly is tangible in how it affects the people of your subdivision, or can be deemed as somehow usable to the city as a whole. But if you can't tie what we use the money for directly to what the person who paid the money is paying it for, then we can't use the money, make it back. So we're kind of hamstrung from the state. So.
And I will guarantee that as we go through the park planning process, we will have ideas that greatly exceed the available budget for construction.
I know that this is a large number and it's kind of shocking to you, Kathleen, but I think that it's a fair number. I think that we have to also bear in mind, with taking out the oddball project in there for whatever reason, that we have to have a certain amount of consistency across the board so that we treat developments and developers the same. You know, we appreciate everything that you're doing with this development, and everybody's excited about it, but we have to try to take each piece and make sure that we don't create carve-outs for individual developers. So I know it's a large amount, and I know it's a little staggering to see numbers like that, but I think it's a fair amount.
You know, one of the things I had proposed to Matt, it sounds like it might not be an option based on your plans, was that we take back the dedication and we pay the fee in lieu total, because we were going to develop that as parkland anyway. Those were soccer, you know, fields and pickleball courts and basketball courts. So then we pay all of the development fees, you know what I mean? Like, so, I mean, that, I guess that would have been an option. But it sounds like based on what you're looking at, in terms of the parkland right next to it, that you need that land for utilities or.
No, it sounds like hardball to me, but that's, you know, you can play that game if you'd like. So, you know,
I'm
give
not
and take. Sorry, when you say something, we could take it away and just pay you the money. I
Well,
mean,
no,
that's an option if you'd
was-
like to do that.
But it is, I wanted to say that it would be an option. I'm not trying to play hardball. I'm just saying, I'm not trying to take it back. I was saying, would that be something that would be of interest?
And Kathleen, my short answer is I'd recommend against that due to as you referenced, we need that 3 acres for utilities. If for anything that's going to be served by electricity or water, we're going to need that 3 acres for.
No, and I don't,
Not
I apologize if
electricity.
I'm coming in a little strong.
Yeah,
It just-
I'm sorry.
The
I
way
think
you
I
said
think
it made
we-
it sound like, well, we
No,
could just
I
take
was
that.
putting it out there as an option I was putting it out there as an option, if you'd rather not take the 3 acres and then use the additional money to build out that other park space. I wasn't playing hardball. I was just saying that's something we could talk about.
All right. I mean, that's all on the table. I think the 3 acres is very valuable to us. And I think we've been
Okay.
very appreciative, and that this committee's talked about it when it first came up. And so it's exciting. It's so nice to have somebody throw 3 acres at you, even though it's just 3 acres, it's still 3 acres. We're out of land and the city's out of property. And so at the moment, the more people who come into the city, the higher the buildings go, the more pressure on the existing parks. And so our budget's just to simply maintain what we have in lieu of increased use is expanding and everything. And that's part of the reason why the fees are not desirable. I'd rather have all the acreage and not a dollar come in, to be honest with you, but that's not going to happen. But that's why we're pushing. But no, we're very appreciative of that land. Thank you. But as Dan was saying, I think that the fact is the case is really to be made to those people who are going to make the final decisions, which are going to be Plan Commission and ultimately City Council. I mean, I think we as parks have to look at what's the vested interest to us is we need to maintain as much parkland as we can and funding for the parks. And so to me, the feeling is this is what the city ordinance says, and those numbers, as painful as it may be, is simply a recommendation we may have to make. And then the argument goes to the city why we understand the bias of parks, but this is why I want something different, and argue that case another level, because we don't make the final decision. We just recommend.
Yeah.
Matt,
And
you have your hand up.
I don't envy you your positions. I
Oh,
mean,
thank you.
I know you're doing a lot with a very little.
No, thank you.
John,
Yeah,
you took the words, but I just want to reiterate it. And I think it's important to note, maybe more so for the Park Commission than Kathleen, because I know Kathleen understands this as well, that if the Park Commission isn't advocating for the most for parks, they're not doing their job.
Yeah.
And
Right.
so I think that's why it's important that we had this discussion and talk through this. But like John said, ultimately the council is the referee. And
Yeah.
whether that's, different opinions from committees or different opinions from staff, whatever it may be, ultimately council's that arbiter that has to decide to make the final decision.
Yeah, I think when you look at some of those anomalous issues too, those are council issues. There's been many things that historically have gone through this committee, and then they flip over when they get to the council. I have no idea what magic's going on and behind what doors, but that's for them. That Dan can respond to that.
There's no
Any other
magic.
discussion on the issue? Whoa, Matt. Oh, there we go. All right, so I think we basically have a set of numbers that are set forward. And I think unless anybody else wants to say their piece, we need to take some action one way or another on this. I open the floor for anybody who wants to take action.
I'll go ahead and make a motion that we accept the 3 acres and in addition require the correct number, the approximate 1.3 million for the fees for this plat.
All right, we have a motion. Do we have a second to the motion?
I'll second that motion.
Nick, second. Okay, discussion. Comments, additions?
I do have one comment. I just,
John,
I don't understand all, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. Go ahead, Joan.
Okay, I don't, I'm not as experienced.
We're losing you now.
Middleton also has to realize there's other.
Joan, we're losing you. Can you get closer to your microphone or?
Preserve area for parks and.
Is there other people hearing Joan? I'm not.
No, I'm not.
I believe, and Joan, please correct me if I'm wrong, but I think what Joan was trying to state is the frustration of not only this development, but other development projects that aren't meeting the ordinance in terms of land dedication. And this is, it's comments that staff here, I know it's comments that elected officials here specifically about the multifamily housing development is that we're not getting parkland. And I think that the concern here is that it's a 42 acre, correct me if I'm wrong, but 42, 44 acre site. And when the ordinance says, 29 acres, there has to be some give and take and some balance to try and achieve the density, because there is limited land, and we know people want to live in Middleton for the schools, quality of life, other reasons, as well as throughout Dane County, and there's a significant shortage in housing. And so I think the city staff and elected officials are trying to work and compromise and try and figure out the best way forward, and it creates situations like this because there isn't a blanket answer for every project, and every project kind of has to be viewed and interpreted as they come forward, and it creates some of these situations. Kathleen's team and Kathleen have been great to work with, and I have no doubt they're going to build a great subdivision.
Sure.
But I think, as everyone's expressed here, we've got to find a way to make this work, and from a park standpoint and all standpoints.
Yeah. All right. I will add to that, Kathy. I think that there's a beautiful project you're doing, and I don't want to give you the sense that somehow you're failing or not doing what needs to be done, but what the city needs and what's ultimately there for almost everybody never quite lands dead center where everybody can say, fine, good job, this is the way to do it. So I think with this motion, we're taking our shot that says that we have to stand up for parks, and the policy of the city has to lay what this is, and then we'll see when it moves on to the next committee. So
That sounds good. Thank you.
any other discussion, comments? All right, hearing none, we take the vote. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? All right, thank you. Motion carries. Thank you, Kathleen, for your time, and we'll
Thank you.
see you in another committee.
Yep. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. All right, moving on to item number 2, logo
Looks good.
in 3 different colors, right?
Well, when you talk about logo, it's great to have the color version, and then there's the version you can put on clothing and use with other things. So they did a blue background. Blue tends to be a very popular color on social media, and trying to get rid of some of the whites, and it makes the white in the logo stand out a little bit better. So there's the standard logo, which is the white background. There's this logo that can also be used for social media, that has the blue background. And then there's the black and white for printing on t-shirts and things of the such when we need a one color logo. So they presented 7 options. This was the landslide. Every staff member liked this of the bunch, and it's not because the other ones were bad. I think everybody was just pretty consistent that this was the one they liked.
But this logo has been around for a while, right?
Correct. And again, thank you, John, because I know our new members are probably looking at this like, what's going on here?
Yeah.
So the city logo is the city logo, and there's no deviation from the city logo.
Mhm.
But then we do staff shirts, and every one of them looks different because we've got a different font or some goofy way of putting Parks and Recreation on a shirt. So the idea was to standardize something so that moving forward, there's a brand and we can repeat and reuse and provide this for when we are doing printing services. So it is the city logo. It is a very subtle incorporation of Parks and Recreation into the existing city logo.
Yeah. Is that the same green that the city uses for all the others?
Correct.
The Kmart green, I call it.
The logo, the company that did the work took the branding guidelines the city has for use of the logo and incorporated, used the same color scheme and tried to keep it as consistent as possible.
All right, comments?
I like it.
Yep.
I move we accept the logo.
Okay, we have a motion and
I'll second.
David second. All right, discussion? Comments? All right, hearing none. All those in favor of approval of this particular logo design, say aye.
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 Aye. Opposed? All right, thank you. There you have it, Matt.
Thank you all.
Go for it. We all want t-shirts now with it. Okay, item number 3, design services awarding a contract to Parkitecture as proposed. Why don't you take us through this, Matt?
Yeah, I was very grateful to receive 3 proposals. It's a little bit of unknown right now, the amount of work that's out there. And so we received 3 proposals back. I think for those that have been on the commission previously, you understand that Parkitecture and Planning is Blake's firm. They've done a lot of work for the city. MSA recently completed our park and open space plan and was the engineer on the ADA work at Firefighters Park last summer. So we have good working relationships with them. JSD is a large planning firm. They have offices throughout the state. They've done work previously in Middleton, but it goes back probably in the 2008 to 2011 timeframe. They did work for the city. I think all 3 firms are more than capable of doing the work. As often happens, everybody looks at it a little bit differently. I tried to share all 3 have done relevant experience, both with boat launches and park planning. There's extensive experience by all 3 firms. I think the JSD, they included tree survey and wetland delineation that the others included as optional additional services. MSA had a very enhanced public engagement scope. And I'm not saying that's necessarily a bad thing. You can see that the cost per hour, and I think if you took out the tree survey and the wetland delineation that JSD proposed, I think the cost per hour is all very, very similar within cents. And I'm making the recommendation to award this to Parkitecture, not just because it's the low cost. They have relevant experience. We have a working relationship with them. I know they'll do a good job, and I think the hours that they have a lot of project align with our goals for, and I think it's important to note, this is to develop a concept. Once that concept is developed in a budget, we're going to have to request funding, whether that's next year or down the road, to implement these improvements. The concept plan in terms of the Lake Street boat launch will form some of the discussion for the upcoming street project that's planned there for 2024. And so I think it's important to move forward with the work. I think Parkitecture will do a good job. I think all 3 would. But for all of those reasons, I'm recommending we award this to Parkitecture.
I'll go ahead and make a motion to award the contract to Parkitecture.
Do we have a motion? Do we have a second? I guess I'll go ahead and second it.
I will second it.
Okay, Joan, you second it. That's better. Just a comment, I guess. When you talk about one proposal putting about a significant amount of public engagement, I think on one hand, it's a great idea. On the other hand, we do this every time, every park, and it's sort of the same people with the same issues and the same answers. So to me, I think we save a little bit by looking at that firm that's done a fair amount around the city and has already asked those questions many times and hopefully has those answers. So I'm in support of this motion.
The one thing that I do want to point out that everyone's aware, and it is in the cover letter that is part of Parkitecture's submittal, is that they did some initial work for one of the property owners adjacent to the boat launch.
Okay.
And they've indicated that in their letter. I don't think it's a significant conflict of interest, but wanted to make you aware that they previously did some work for a landowner there and could do additional work. There's a landowner down there that is potentially looking at a redevelopment project.
So does this Parkitecture then have different teams that would be working on those projects as opposed to our project?
Well,
Because
the
potentially there could be a
proposal,
conflict.
Parkitecture themselves is a 2-person team. They have also included one of the engineers from Strand on their team to do some of this work. I'm sure that if that's a requirement from the city, we could ask them to ensure that the staff that worked on the adjacent property owner is not involved on this, but I did want to make sure everyone was aware of that.
Well, you've worked with them. What's your sense about this?
Um,
I want your opinion.
That's a one-time property owner, and the city's done multiple work over the years with the team from Parkitecture, and I think I trust their judgment and that they're going to do what's best in the city's interest, and that, you know, between myself and Sean Stowski, who's ultimately going to be involved in this in Public Works, I think we're going to ensure that the city's best interests are met.
Sure. Well, hopefully by repeat contracts, we have a little leverage too. So, all right, any other discussion? All right, hearing none, yeah.
Just one quick question. The only question I had, Matt, is that their bid is significantly lower. There's nothing that, other than the enhanced public input in MSAs and the wetland delineation in JSDs, there isn't anything significantly missing.
No, if not at all, not in any of
All right.
them. If in fact, if you remove the tree survey and wetland delineation from the JSD proposal, I believe their cost was either 20 or 21,000. So that, I mean, these two are the JSD and Parkitecture are very close. The MSA one, it's really the hours that they had committed to the public engagement.
Because one of the things we're becoming more cognizant and conscious of is change orders and amendments for changing the scope of service. So we want to kind of make sure from the outset, when we're accepting these proposals, that we, as much as we can, make sure they're complete so that we can avoid that problem.
And what's important to note is we struggled with this RFP in terms of to what extent, and we capped it at concept plans. There was some initial discussion to include engineering design, but when you're talking about concept plans and not being really sure what your concept is, it's hard to try and pinpoint what kind of engineering services might be required. So we tried to separate that and to avoid exactly what Dan's talking about with having to come back with amendments. So this is going to be a concept plan. We will eventually have to do some design engineering services to take that concept plan to bid.
Matt, just maybe this question should have been asked earlier, but how much of all of that land is actually city land? I mean, are all that forested treat area, is that all part of our land?
It is. That's managed in conservancy, and I don't think that we're going to change the management of that. Now, I think one of the things that you could look at is connectivity, is how we connect the neighborhood more through not only the public park, the conservancy lands, the boat launch, and try and create some more neighborhood connectivity and pedestrian movement there, because there aren't sidewalks and there is a lot of current pedestrian traffic on the street.
Well, this certainly came up as an issue with Plan Commission when we were talking about the new development by Captain Bill's or whatever that was, and that, you know, that the fact there was a park across the street or kitty corner down a block was an important factor in sort of letting that go through. But the connectivity then becomes that much more important because there's 60 or 70 units in that building alone. So.
And I hate to bring this chorus that kind of follows me everywhere I go, but both of these sites are not real high on our ADA report card. There's no ADA compliance at the Lakeview East Park and the boat launch. It's the biggest concern is that there isn't accessible parking or an accessible route for someone with a disability to be able to launch a boat park within vicinity to the amenity. So that's really the largest goal we have, is how we bring that into ADA compliance.
Maybe just sell it off to someone.
I'm not sure that we can do that. I think we have to maintain a public boat launch.
That's all right. All right. Any other discussion on the motion? Sorry, I should pull it back to the topic at hand. All right, hearing no discussion, all those in favor of the motion to give this bid to Parkitecture, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, thank you. Motion's carried. Dog shelter. Matt, what happened to the money?
I'll let I'll let Chuck answer that. Chuck's worked hard and has stayed on this project. The challenge has been is to try and find a location for the shelter where we were avoiding the clay liner cap to the landfill. And they've done a number of test pits. They've had conversation, Chuck's had conversation with the DNR and has worked this site through to be approved by the MRD board. For those not familiar, the MRD board, and I'm going to mess this up, is Wanakee, Middleton, and
Shore
Sherwood
Hills.
And all have representatives that vote and approve anything that happens at the MRD site. And the city of Middleton and Sean Stowski is he's kind of the chairperson of that 3 community committee, and has worked with Chuck closely on this as well.
Chuck, the question to you.
Yeah, so we did have, this project's been going on for 2 years, really. We were looking at this back in 2018 and 2019 and kind of, we dug some test pits. We were going to put the shelter in a different location, but a lot of the concern has been, where is the landfill itself? The DNR has very strict rules that we can't build something over a landfill. So there's conflicting maps that show where the landfill boundary is. And we had actually dug some test pit holes in another location on the south part of the fence there. And we thought we were coming across the landfill itself. Then COVID hit and it just got delayed and delayed. And unfortunately, the person who had put that money in just kind of got cold feet, and he thought it was never going to get done. It had been delayed and delayed for so long that he withdrew his generous donation. With that said, I think Matt knows that we do collect money from the dog park, people that register for permits at the dog park. And we have, I think, a pretty significant amount of money in there to cover probably this open air shelter, as well as, maybe some solar lights as well. So I think the money's there. It is unfortunate that we did have that money pulled back, but
Yeah.
I think it just took too long and he kind of got cold feet. So.
I mean, this may sound like a strange question, but why is a shelter needed there? I mean, I've taken dogs there and I'm usually walking my dog, not sitting in a shelter.
Yeah. So the idea there is that, there are a lot of people that actually use the dog park as more of a social thing. There's some older people that like to use that and are not able to really walk around as readily, but they would like to just go out there and just, sit and just maybe throw the ball and not have to walk as much. There is an umbrella structure out there, but it really doesn't provide a lot of shade. I know myself with my dog, and if you have a dog, you realize that, they don't necessarily care if it's pouring rain outside. They still need to get out, and they force you to go out there. And the idea there would be, if we had some type of permanent shelter, maybe we could hide under the shelter and let the dogs get wet as they run after things. And also in the winter, of course, a lot of people use it in the winter, and it would be a more of a shelter that they could get away from the hot sun in the summer and maybe shield themselves a little bit from the cold wind in the winter. So it's not meant to replace, as you said, most people do walk around, but there are a lot of people that just like to sit there and kind of conversate with other people, and that's kind of what it's meant to provide.
All right. Commission, questions?
Matt, how much do we take in per year into the dog park fund? It looks like we have a balance of 90,000 roughly.
On a good year, we push 25 a year. It probably ranges between 17, 18 to $25,000 a year.
And what has that money primarily been used for?
It's actually, we buy maybe $1,000 worth of doggy bags, and we've replaced some gates and done some minor maintenance, but we've not done any significant project in the last 4 or 5 years. And I think timing is right to do that. It's important to note that balance was at end of October of 2021. So nothing that's been collected this year is reflected in that balance number.
Just to add to that a little bit, there was some improvements done a number of years ago. If you recall, originally the approach road to the dog park was gravel. And I think it was around 2014, the city did decide to go ahead and pave that whole area, the approach to the dog park. And that was done, I think, using park funds. And also we have recently put in double gates onto the fence, and that allows the dogs better to, familiarize themselves with the dog park. So we have been doing some smaller things, but probably the last major thing was paving that road, which was probably about 5 or 6 years ago that we did that.
And Matt, what is the status of all that land that got ordered, added on the northeast corner? Wasn't there some land that was donated or something a few years ago?
Not that I'm aware of, John.
Oh, okay.
Northeast.
Somehow I was aware that the whole park was going to expand off of the landfill and somebody had donated some acreage there, but never mind. Different project.
Not that I'm aware of. The one thing that I would ask for everyone's kind of awareness of is that we're intending this work to be this fall. But it's really dependent on the availability of the parks crew. One of the cautions I have is that if we decided that park staff couldn't do this, I'm leery of being able to find a concrete contractor that could come in and pour a slab for us. That first off, that the project wouldn't necessarily be big enough, and that it's really hard to find concrete workers right now. So I've talked to the park staff. They're on board to work on this fall, but I don't think anyone anticipated we'd be chasing trees the last 7-8 days the way we did, and you can never really account for what's next. So just a little caveat there in terms of schedule. We're going to aim for this fall, but that if you do approve this project, that's the target construction window, but I'm not making any 100% guarantees.
And to read this right, your presumption is that it will ultimately need another $24,000 or so.
I'm thinking the total shelter project between buying the kit, the shelter kit, and the concrete work, and then any unforeseen additions or there's some PVC pipe. I mean, that's pretty minor, but I think that's a high number, and that it'll likely be less. But we're working off of a shelter kit estimate that's a few years old, and we all know what the price of steel has done. So if you would award this, we're going to put out a request for quotes on the shelter and bring that back, that shelter number, bring back to approve as well.
I guess the question for Chuck is this, I think what's the number I saw, 8 by 12 or 12 by 20, something like that?
It's 20 by 24.
Oh, okay, so that's bigger than I was thinking.
Yep.
So it's an adequate size.
We had actually gone through Lana Lee of Lee Recreation to get the estimate that we did get several years ago. And Matt's probably correct. We need to update that because it is several years old, but it was a $12,000 price tag to buy the kit back then in like 2017. So who knows what it is now, but that's what it was then.
All right. So Matt, we're looking at this sort of like a GIP decision, like a concept approval rather than a specific approval.
Absolutely. That's a good way of looking at it, John.
And you can slip it back.
I think what I wanted was the formalization that we want to move forward with this, and that I should spend staff time on, soliciting quotes and lining up the project.
Yeah, okay. Well, okay, so open it back to the commission. Thoughts about this as a project?
We'll make a motion that we approve the concept and let Matt go forth with figuring out what it's going to cost to bring back to us.
Okay, we have a motion from Dan. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Nick seconds. All right, discussion. Motion is concept approval to make sure that Matt has more work to do. All right, any discussion, comments? All right, hearing none. All those in favor of the motion, say aye.
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 Opposed? Was there an opposed? I didn't. Okay. I think it was, I thought I heard a voice when I said opposed. Maybe that was Chuck.
I'm in favor of it.
Okay, All right, thank you. Motion is approved. Moving on to number 5. Pavement, my favorite subject. How many times it's failed in the past?
This is new. This would be the new basketball court at Parisi that we talked about back in March. I requested quotes of 3 of the major asphalt suppliers that we deal with. 2 of them came and looked at it, and strangely enough, I've still only received 1 quote. I went above and beyond in terms of trying to connect with Tri-County, and still haven't received anything. So at this point, we have 1 quote for the work, and that is from Wolf for the amount of $16,487.
Is it just too small? Is that the issue?
When I called the guy at Tri-County, he'd lost the quote sheet on his desk and was going to be in the office the next day and type it up and send it to me, and here we are. So
Yeah, it was too small. That's why he lost it.
maybe.
So Matt, remind us, this is the one where we're gonna have to put a retaining wall against this thing?
It'd be a small retaining wall in the
Yeah.
one corner that the
Alright.
Parks crew plans to handle that work.
So you'll excavate it and they just have to lay the,
Yeah, we're gonna excavate, lay the base course, make, proof roll, make sure it's ready for pavement.
all right. Is there funding for this?
In the Park Development Fund, yes.
Okay, and you're okay with this?
Yeah, this is a reminder. This is the basketball court that doubles as part of the parking lot at Parisi Park.
Yeah.
And we've got an ADA compliance issue, and I think it makes all the sense that this park deserves a good basketball court
Yeah.
that isn't a dual use feature.
I agree, and I think we found a good spot for it too. So. All right. Any other discussion? Looking for a motion? A motion wasn't made, was it? No.
No, but I'll make that motion.
Okay, David
I'll
made a
second it.
motion.
I will
Jones-
second.
Joan seconds motion. Any discussion?
And the spot for the basketball court was next to the park, like right, because I saw, the only thing I saw were 2 different areas.
Yeah, I apologize. That was a previous Parks Commission meeting where we looked at all the potential sites.
Yeah.
This is across from the ball diamond on the knoll adjacent to the playground. It's really the only site that we had to rule out, unfortunately, the other sites because of conflicts with trees and impact to root structure and the softball field.
Yeah, I think if you're standing at the pitcher's mound staring at the batter, you'd look right through the background and see where this goes.
Okay.
Yeah. All right, any other comments, questions? All right, hearing none, all in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed? All right, motion carried. Number 6, review of the Sustainable City Draft Plan. This was deferred from last time. And I hope you've had some chance to look at this. Matt sent this today.
Yeah, I apologize for the lateness of that, but trying to coordinate some of those discussions and pull that all together took longer than I would have wished.
Maybe you could summarize for us because
I'm
I'm
gonna,
not sure we all
I'm
had
gonna
time.
pull-
I glanced through it quickly, but I didn't have time to sit with it long.
yeah, if it's okay with everyone, I'm gonna pull up that memo. and
Yeah,
we
go
can
ahead.
Work through that.
While you're doing that, Claire, I just want to say welcome. I didn't get to see you last time or talk to you, so welcome to the commission.
Hello. I don't know if you can hear me, but
Yep,
can
we
now.
can hear you.
oh,
Just-
nice.
Just can't see you, but feel free to speak sometime.
Okay.
So we went through, Mark Wigner, our assistant director, and I went through, and I think we pulled out all the key kind of talking points as they relate to Parks and Recreation. If we missed one, I'm sure we can revisit that. But the first And we've had some discussion about that previously, is the conversion to zero emissions vehicles and equipment. We are all for it as staff, but we also know that we need the technology to support and not limit our ability to get work done. And I think the critical piece with that is the commercial mowing equipment just isn't there in terms of battery life to sustain our all-day use on 6 foot wide and 11 foot wide mowers. When it's there, we want to be at that table to implement that type of equipment. We have done we've done a conversion of one set of weed trimmer, push mower, and leaf blower that we'll be evaluating this summer in terms of battery life. And you know, I think the short-term feedback at this point is the battery life is a little underwhelming of what we purchased, and maybe there's some things out there better. I think the concern is that for doing small areas once a day, you know, to just pull out and use them downtown is great. But the idea of one of our seasonal staff operating an electric weed trimmer, and they may be on those things all day for 3 out of the 5 days of the week. And especially during the way things are growing right now, we get done and just recircle the route. So a 45 to 75 minute battery, you got to have a lot of those to make it through an 8-hour day. Net zero. This is one that we actually talked a little bit about when we were designing the Lakeview Park Shelter project, and there was interest both in the city's part and the architect's part in trying to look at that. It goes a little bit, this net zero park shelter goes a little bit against some of our goals, is that it's easy to do in a 3-season shelter. It gets a lot harder to do when you're heating a facility, and a lot of our focus has been making our facilities available year-round use and needing to heat them. So to make a net zero park shelter, you're looking at an increased construction cost with a ground source heat pump. Just a quick estimate was that probably be about a 20% increase on your HVAC. Now you'd have to do the life cycle cost of your energy savings, and not to mention that the city's goals of being reducing fossil fuel use, so that there's some ability there. And I honestly think by the time we're constructing our next park shelter, wherever and whenever that is, that this should be a significant goal of that project, is of at least doing the cost estimating for a net zero facility.
I mean, I might comment that part of the question came to me is, you know, we've already made a decision about what we want to do with the shelters, and then can we make it fit? I don't hear the conversation of saying, how critical are these all 4-season shelters? And what's the trade-off? You know, do we really need as many shelters at 4-season as what would be desirable? And what's the loss as compared to the gain of not having to add that cost? So I think that the conversation as it comes up each time is important, that we aim towards it, just like your equipment with the lawnmowers and weed eaters and stuff like that.
And
I see some people with weed blowers and they could brush it off with a broom faster than they do it with the weed blower.
My quick response on that question, John, about the year-round need for the park shelters is our friend global warming and having 70 degrees in December, and you've got your kids at the playground enjoying the playground and the bathrooms are shut because that phone call is still not fun when moms call and say my child peed themselves because the restrooms were locked. And it's a beautiful day out, and and so the reality is, we know our parks are used year round, and it's just a question of do we want when we have a restroom in a park, do we want it to be used year round, or do we want to deal with those issues?
No, I agree with it, but it's a question that needs to be continually asked.
Absolutely. Resilient landscapes. So we have about 1,100 acres in the system, and we cautiously guesstimate that about 800 of that is in conservancy lands, which we're already in a resilient landscape situation there. And I think, I'm not sure there's another city in our peer group or probably in the state that could state that 70% of their parkland is in a resilient landscape. So I think we're doing really good on this one. We did talk with our contractor, Adaptive Restoration, and they felt that, you know, to convert an acre of parkland to a more natural native state, you're probably looking at $1,000 a year per year for 10 years.
Yeah, but I think we have to ask the question, is it a native state we're looking for, or are we looking here for sustainability? I mean, we could argue even with lawn, we have almost 90, probably 80, 90% permeable surfaces on our parks, and that's better than the rest of the city. So,
right, and then you run into, you know, your soccer fields and your baseball fields that we all know that Kentucky bluegrass is probably the biggest invasive in the community, but I don't think we're moving away from that on our athletic fields anytime soon.
Right.
Land use, there's discussion about, you know, acquiring or continuing to acquire green space and connectivity and green corridors. And, you know, that I mentioned here some of the current acquisition, and that this results in probably an additional 60 acres over the next 2 to 3 years. A lot of that's dependent on Bishop's Bay and the development schedule that development takes over the next few years, because we have considerable parkland that would come in to the city as part of that development. I go on to say that the challenge with adding any parkland is we know our operating budget challenges and current staffing levels make taking on additional acreage a challenge to maintain and stay consistent with anticipated maintenance levels. Also, kind of furthering that issue is that funding's in place to develop the new spaces, but it just adds eventually to a list of deferred or maintenance that needs to occur with the existing infrastructure. I put that, you know, acquiring additional property, we've got our estimate now per acre. I don't know if that's true in all corners of the city, but it's at least a number to use. And that there's a lot of discussion on trail connectivity, which, you know, as staff, we want to see and agree that that's a great goal, but that we're also struggling to maintain the current trail system, and that we need to look at how we preserve what we have in addition to adding new. And to go along with the new, the city's undertaking of the North Mendota Trail project has been both awesome to see, needed, and you know, is working towards that goal as well of further connectivity. There's a statement in there to invest in conservancy lands, including maintaining and improving existing lands, expanding, connecting conservancies, and prioritizing work in upstream areas to protect downstream lands from spread of invasive plants. We think this is a great statement. We're all for it. I know that PRFC and conservancy lands tend to keep things separate, but I just kind of highlighted here that the Conservancy Lands Committee is working to prioritize. In past years, we've kind of went into the budget process with a predetermined number of what we were going to have for capital. And this year, we're going to probably make it tough on not only the Conservancy Lands Committee, city staff, finance committee, but we're going to ask for all the things that maybe need to be addressed from a conservancy land standpoint. We're going to take the same road, at least it's my intention to take the same road with park projects, and hopefully have discussions not only about what those priorities are for 2023, but how we start to address some of that backlog of I don't know, I hate to say deferred maintenance, but at some point it becomes that.
No, but this last statement to me raises a lot of red flags. And I think a lot of it has to do with thinking in the future. As you're saying, we're running out of parkland to acquire. So the idea of acquisition as opposed to maintaining, sustaining what we have and fixing what we have, I think has to become a more overt priority. And this idea of just keep adding more all the time just has, at some point, has to stop. I mean, or slow down, because it's not there to do, and you guys are so stressed with what you do already. I think we also have to sort of delineate, in my mind, between parks and between conservancy land. And as you said about Kentucky bluegrass, the functions of the parks are very different than the functions of the conservancy lands. And so a lot of this idea about talking about upstream lands and water and looking about invasive species, that's important, and I value that, but I'm not sure that should necessarily a park priority. But we don't want to fight against those issues either. Anyways, comments, questions? Thank you, Matt. Don't all speak at once. You forced me to talk.
I can offer some thoughts from kind of where it goes from now, from a staff standpoint, is that
Okay.
I think, as you see by my memo, there's a lot of good things here. The challenge is we have a lot of plans with a lot of good things in them, and not really a plan of how to get from point A to point B with the dollar signs in between. And I don't know how that, moves forward, how we are better as a city in looking at implementation of plans from a funding standpoint. And maybe that's a conversation that's better held at the finance committee level. I don't know what Dan's thoughts are on that, but I mean, that's the ultimate thing. I mean, we put together, every 5 years, a park and open space plan that we know we're going to struggle to fund. A lot of what's in it. And we do the same every 5 years with a conservancy lands plan. And we're not the only department doing plans that, maybe don't have a tangible way of how that plan's going to be implemented, or what success is considered. And I guess that's my concern, with the sustainable city plan is how is success going to be measured? Is it, we've got to get every one of these goals implemented to 100%, or it's a 3-year plan? I mean, what is their, because I think in a lot of ways, and I tried to look at it from we are pretty close on a lot of these things. We are doing a lot of these things already. But it's how many more initiatives for each of these goals are they looking to accomplish?
Well, you brought up something, let me jump in, that I really don't like the word plan, because I don't think there's a plan, and a plan implies that there's a finite resolution, there's funding and a source. To me, I see this as a beautiful grid that you hold in front of your face when you're making decisions, when you're talking about stuff. It's always there, it's sitting on the wall in front of you. You should be thinking about every one of these things as we make decisions, but in and of itself, I don't think of it as a plan. I appreciate this as a guidance or device to sort of aims us in a direction that we want to always be made cognizant of, and we deal with it the best we can. But that, to me, is short of a plan. But I like everything in here, and I like particularly your idea of slowly infusing it in such a way that it's sustainable and doable, and ultimately becomes an end result rather than a plan that has a budget and a time and a space. Other comments?
I think, Matt, you did a really good job of highlighting like some of the challenges. You mentioned the battery life of lawnmowers and leaf blowers and weed whackers, and that it's really hard to meet those goals when we just don't have the technology available for these tools on a commercial or commercial scale. Like I look at lawnmowers, most of us are using our lawnmowers for what, a half hour every week, and as opposed to 8 hours every day. So I think it's good to have goals in mind, but we also have to, I think you did a really good job of highlighting the fact that technology, we just have to get the technology there. And as the technology improves, we look into it when we can, but in the meantime, we make the improvements as we're able to.
But I'm wondering, would it be possible if you had, some electrical equipment that you could rotate out? Not, you're not going to like get rid of all your old, but you could kind of that you're using, if you had that you could rotate with the non. I wonder if that's a possibility.
It can definitely be part of that implementation plan. I think the other thing is that you have to anticipate that as the batteries get better, the cost is probably going to increase too. And so you're going to want to manage, how much inventory you have and how many mowers too, because I know the mechanics don't want a lot of excess equipment too. So there has to be kind of a balance there of how we do that.
Right. But I think it's maybe Joan's pointing to, I didn't hear all she said, but that, you know, the idea that right now cost is high, so let's wait till it becomes more infused in this society and their cost will go down. But if we're not part of that process of helping to buy and purchase some of those things, some of the times for part of it, we're not helping that come about. So I do kind of like the idea that, you know, you don't, it's not an all or nothing, but you infuse when you can, even if it may not be the most perfect solution, it might be at least acceptable for some things at some times.
Well, one of the things you can look at, because as Nick said, that you have to have equipment that can fulfill the mission. If it doesn't fulfill the mission, it's no good to anybody, and it just ends up costing you more. But on the topic of electric weed whackers, trimmers, mowers, and so on and so forth, obviously for the crews that go around and are doing the boulevards and the circles and everything, and that wouldn't work. But there is potentiality that you could use electrical equipment in the downtown area where the spaces are smaller. It's not going to be running all day. So, I mean, we could, you know, look at certain places and use some of that kind of equipment in certain places, and that would be a start. You know, so that's one way of looking at it.
Yeah, I agree. Others?
I was just going to say, if we could prioritize some of the small engine pieces, which I believe are larger polluters than the 4 cycles of the lawnmower and such, but the weed whackers, leaf blowers, that sort of thing, those tend to pollute more and probably are more readily available in something that would work for us. Although I don't know what all's out there.
All right. Well, sort of what I'm, yeah, go ahead, Dan.
Matt, did you need a discussion on this? I mean, do they just want our ideas? I don't know that.
Sustainability was asking for feedback on the plan from various committees, and maybe the feedback is this memo. And I don't know if you want to add anything to that, or
Well, it could be the memo. I think a general statement, in my sense, is what I'm hearing, is that nobody's objecting to most of the ideas in the proposal, but they have to be done in a practical and rational and sustainable and, you know, process that takes time. And so that I think we're all willing to look at these as guidelines every single time we move forward on something, but that it has to be balanced. But that fundamentally, I'm not hearing anybody say they don't like what's in this document as a general concept or plan. All right. Does that give you enough, Matt, or you got and use this or whatever? Just, I think, you know, you were throwing out points which are good. Maybe just put a summary to it. All right. No one else have anything about that? All right, we'll leave it at that. Final motion is to adjourn. Do I have a motion?
before you adjourn, real quick, John.
All right.
Our next scheduled meeting date is July 4th. I don't think anybody wants to be here for a park board meeting that night or park commission meeting that night.
right.
So the next meeting would be July 18th.
Do you need a motion on that, or are you just going to do it?
No.
All right. Well, we'll see you in a month and have a good 4th of July. Now I would entertain a motion.
Motion to adjourn.
Thank you, David. Do we have a second?
I guess second.
All right. I think by acclamation, we'll presume that everybody's in agreement. So you all have a good 4 weeks, and we'll see you next time. So
Thank you.
Everyone, thank you.